I might just start by introducing myself while folks are making their way over. Um, and let me know if you have trouble hearing me or I'm sharing my screen here, but hopefully y'all can see me as well. I can't see you, but um, I'm Sue Kane, and I work for the North Central Education Service District as the Director of STEM Initiatives and Strategic Partnerships, which is a pretty fantastic way of saying I get to wear a variety of community hats and support initiatives that are things like STEM education and CS education, and have done a variety of things with different partners across the state and gotten to learn about innovative practices and opportunities for supporting schools and for bringing community in innovative ways to support CS education, with the goal of making this an opportunity for all students to be able to engage. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the script process today, and it's something that I learned about 2.5 years ago, and some of the other states that are trying to figure this out on how to get CS education equitably out for all students. And it was actually an innovative practice that was put together by a group out of New York. And I'm super excited to be able to share it with you. I think it has the potential to really kind of level set the playing field for our school districts, especially some of the ones in North Central Washington where I serve are smaller districts. They're more rural and remote communities. And we want to make sure that the CS education pathways that we're building for students are equitable even in those schools. As well as those that are, maybe in more under-resourced districts. So this can actually really help lay a groundwork for districts to be able to implement equitable CS education. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I've got my email and my Twitter handle on there on the screen. So if that is something that you want to follow up with me about, please do. But we'll go ahead and kick it off. So my goals for today are twofold, actually. I'm going to start with a part of the workshop that we would do as a script workshop with your school district. We would begin with what's your vision for equitable CS education? And it's been a theme for our summit yesterday and today to really kind of help you bring that vision out and help you put language to it. Some of us are motivated by things like equity and social justice. Some of us see CS as potential workforce or an economic driver. Some of us see CS as an opportunity to really achieve some of the school reforms, some of the things that we've been talking about over the last day and a half. And it's all about why CS. And so the visions exercise that we're going to do today will actually allow you to pull your own visions and what resonates most with you and have language to be able to articulate that. And this is an activity that we do with school districts. It's actually the first thing that we do with school districts who are going through the script process, and it guides their experience through that process. So we're going to do that today. So you'll get a sneak preview of what this looks like and the tools. And then I'm going to give you an overview of SCRIPT, which is an acronym, of course, and it's the Strategic CS for All is an organization. So also sort of an acronym within an acronym. I don't know what that means, but Strategic CS for All resource and implementation planning tool. And that's going to be the guide, the process, the framework that we use to get you a district plan for implementation of equitable CS education. So I'll introduce you to that process as well. I want to start, though, anchoring you in the same way that we would anchor a school district. And that is our visions really inform the types of initiatives that take hold in our school districts and those that kind of blow in and blow out. And this quote from John Dewey talks about how educational plans and projects, if you've been in education for a while, you know these kinds of initiatives, they come in, they come out, and some of them have more stay than others. But educational plans that attach to your value system or your personal rationale for education, they tend to stay a little bit longer. And so this one's talking about if we don't find a way to attach CS education in this context to our personal rationale and values, why this is important for students, it will just blow out with the next intellectual breeze that comes through. And our schools are constantly bringing in these new initiatives and releasing them. And so we want to start with this meaningful work by allowing educators and administrators and communities to understand that CS education can empower learning through, um, you know, to bring about those values and those opportunities for youth. So this graphic is just visually kind of reinforcing what I've just said on the previous slide. But basically, when we start with a vision, our vision is going to incorporate or bring in those yellow arrows, the rationales and the values that we have for CS education. And that's going to inform the way that we design our implementation. If you believe that CS education is for a specific set of students, your implementation will bring about that vision. So it's really important to have a vision that aligns with those values and those rationales that align with how you want to see this opportunity. If our goal is equitable CS education, we want to be able to bring in those values and those rationales from the very beginning. So what we're going to do here in a second is I'm going to give you an opportunity to take a quiz. It's kind of a fun quiz, and it's built by the folks at CS for All. And what they did was they actually commissioned a study, a white paper study by Vogel, and they asked hundreds of people across the country why we should teach CS education for all students. And then with all the responses that they got, they actually categorized them, they grouped them and organized them, and really kind of pulled through and found that there are 7 different real value systems that people identify with. It's not to say that you can't have more than one value system for CS education, but it helped to be able to put them into big buckets, so to speak, because that allows us to be able to organize our thoughts and our goals and our vision of what CS education looks like. And so what you're going to do is you're going to actually take their CS Visions quiz. I'm going to give you a link here in a second, and I've got a QR code on the next slide that will actually allow you to go directly to it. But what you're going to find is they do collect some demographic information about how this tool is being used. So don't be alarmed when it asks you first to tell them where you are, at, and I think it's the age and the gender, and they're kind of capturing interest in this CS equity tool with that. But then you'll actually go to a screen and you'll be given 2 tiles at a time. So here I've just done a screenshot and you see a purple and a gold tile. And it's going to have 2 reasons. It's going to both start the same. We should teach computer science because, and then you'll have 2 different statements here. And your task is going to be to select the one that resonates most with you. And then it will bring up another 2 and another 2. And it takes about 5 minutes, but it's actually going to be identifying, where you selected this concept resonates more with me than that one. If you're like me, I've gone back and taken this test a couple different times. And depending on what I'm reading and what I'm listening to, sometimes even the time of the year, I've actually identified with different things. Maybe I've been really worried about workforce issues or economic development issues, and those statements really just jump off at me. So this is just a snapshot of where you're at this current moment. And you'll also know that sometimes it's going to show you 2 and you're thinking, I don't know if I have like a preference over these 2. It's okay. This is just for today. And this is just to give you kind of a rough guide. And you might actually resonate with both statements. And so for today, you can just pick one. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give you some time here. And you're going to take the CS Visions quiz. I forgot I had one slide in here. These are the 7 value systems, and we'll kind of come back and kind of debrief. But some of us are motivated, or we think CS education is more for economic and workforce development. Some of us are around citizenship and digital citizenship or civic engagement. Some of us think that this is about competencies and making sure that students are capable and have specific literacies. Some of us are around that's technological, social, and scientific innovation. And that's the reason we should teach CS, because we'll get more innovation out of this next generation of learners. Some believe CS education is about equity and social justice. And we heard some pretty compelling narrative this morning in the keynote to that respect. Or the school reform, or school improvement and reform. And then the last is around personal agency, joy, and fulfillment. And the researchers that were out there, they heard narrative, rationale that really kind of backed up all 7 of these. They're all valuable. Not one is more important than the other, but how you see it will actually impact how you set goals and how your district does its strategic plan. Oh, I'm missing my my QR code slide. I wonder what I've done here. I'm gonna see if I don't want to go. We're gonna go here. We're gonna take the CS Visions quiz, and then we'll kind of come back and see how you all did. So what I'm gonna do is give you about 5 minutes. It is 1:14. So I'm gonna give you 5 minutes to take this quiz. I'm gonna put some music on so you don't think I've gone away, but also are not distracted. And if you have a secondary device to be able to do this, you can use the QR code. Otherwise, I'm gonna put this in the chat. Oh, Dan's got it in there. Thank you. All right. Hopefully, I'm not interrupting you. Hopefully, you were able to get through your quiz. And I'm curious. So, I did open a poll, but the poll will only let you select one. But as you get your results, if you're so bold, I'd love to be able to see what resonated most with you. You could put those in the chat and let me know. That way, I kind of know that you've finished your CS Visions quiz as well. I see some citizenship, economic workforce development, competencies, and literacies. And I think I was in there this afternoon as well, just kind of checking in, making sure everything. I also had competencies and literacies and economic workforce development when I took it today. Um, So like I said, I've done this now several times, and I'm always amazed at how it's a little bit different sometimes, just depending on what I'm reading and who I'm talking to. Um, but I did want to make a note. Oops, now I don't know if it'll let me. There we go. I did want to make a note that there are some rationales that actually touch on multiple or maybe straddle a couple of these values. And so it is imperfect in terms of putting these categories around it. For example, I might hear something like, we should teach CS because we need to promote a more diverse workforce. And of course, that is an aspect of economic and workforce development, but it's also an aspect of equity and social justice. And so you might have some that straddle a couple. And I'm seeing some of the others come in that are also civic engagement or citizenship, civic engagement, competencies, literacies, economic workforce. So school reform. It's always fascinating to me to see which ones resonate at what points in time and what points in the year. Oops, I've got another one here that's a rationale that we might hear out in the field. That's we should teach CS because it'll allow youth to solve problems in their communities through technology. And this one has a couple different, probably actually three of the categories where there's elements of the citizenship and civic engagement in that rationale. There's the technological and social scientific innovation aspects, and also some equity and social justice. So you can actually see some of these statements that you'll hear just in casual conversation just kind of start to organize them in these underlying value systems and rationales. What's interesting is, having done this work now with some of the school districts in Washington State, you will find that your school values sometimes come out as a team. So when we do this with districts, we actually have each person individually assess theirs, and then we do some consensus building around, where are the values that are commonly held. So if you had a team of 7 and they all have 3, where do you see a heat map of certain values that they have in common? And what's really neat is being able to see a room full of districts, and people will say, "Oh, of course that district resonated there. They are all about that thing." And so you almost see it as, some of their personalities and some of the values that we communicate to our communities are readily recognized by those around us. And so this part is really neat, and it helps your team for your district organize around a common vision of what this might look like, because it's easier to be able to communicate. I've been in these workshops where we get stuck with a mission and vision statement, and we're tweaking certain words, and it doesn't say exactly the right words that the one leader at the table feels like it should, and you can be in this cycle. What's unique to the script process is we move through your vision statement and your mission statement in about 30 minutes, and people are generally pretty happy with it. And they see themselves in it. I think it has to do with part of this, of being able to kind of come through and see statements that really reinforce and allow you to be heard, and feel like you've been a part of the development of it in a pretty structured process. And so we take a statement like this. If this was my district's vision statement, it's easy to say, as a district, we want all youth to be able to solve problems in their community through technology. Vision statement, and then you can actually empower your district strategic plan to set things behind that to make it happen. So this is the first step that we take districts through in the script. So coming back to our second goal for this hour, and that is, what is script? And as I mentioned, it's an acronym within an acronym, but it's the Strategic CS for All Resource and Implementation Planning Tool. For those of you who have done Education Reform Initiative before, or strategic planning with districts, you're going to recognize readily some really cool best practices sort of baked into this process. But I'm going to show you just an overview. And what this looks like is, we typically pull together a team of 3 to 7. Required ingredients for this team is at least one district administrator and a building administrator, depending on the size of the district. Of course, some of our smaller districts, that might be one and the same, and that's an okay thing. But you want to be able to have the ability to, really put some intentionality around this strategic plan. And so a district administrator and building administrator. Your teacher does not have to be a CS teacher. It can be the person who's going to be teaching CS first, but ideally, when we're doing implementation that's district-wide and it's equitable CS education, it could be a teacher that's an elementary teacher that is comprehensive. It could be a specials teacher, but a teacher. Typically, district teams will bring a couple of teachers, and I've seen some vertically scaffold that so that it's an elementary, middle, and high, but that's not required. But again, you want to have that teacher. And then support staff are also welcome. I've seen some really great things come from librarians and paras and TOSAs, depending on the size of the district. Try to keep the team 3 to 7 is the sweet spot. A little bit bigger than that, and it can be a little bit hard to move it forward. But we want to set them up in a way that they also have the voices that they need around the table. So that's typically the sweet spot, is that 3 to 7. We tend to try to do these with multiple districts at the same time. And that is because there is learning and even a little bit of competition, healthy competition across districts. Some aha moments, some different ways of looking at things. And it can give you when you look over at the table next to you, or we do some gallery walks in the virtual that allows you to kind of peek over and see what they're doing. There's a couple different modalities. We've done these workshops virtually, and that typically looks like 5 2-hour sessions, and we tackle one segment of each rubric in those sessions. Typically, those have been done like a Tuesday and a Thursday in the morning for 2 hours for 2.5 weeks. And in fact, I think we've got one coming up in November, December this year that will take that format. We've also done these in person. When we do them in person, it's typically like 2 full days. And during the script workshop, you're going to work through a process. As I mentioned, we start with that collective vision. And that vision allows us to get really super specific to your district and the things that you value in your community, and build that hyper local long-term goal. All students can do whatever it is that you want to empower them to be able to do through CS education. And then you go through a cycle of reflecting on where you currently are. There's a really incredible rubric. We're going to take a look at that here in just a second. There are actually 5 rubrics that give you an ability to say, here's where we are, and here's where we want to be. And then you can actually chart out the specific steps that you're going to need to take to be able to get there. And that assessment, as real as it can be about, what are we doing? Where do we see access to CS education now? It could go from we don't see it at all to, well, there's this one 5th grade teacher who kind of does it. That, like there's a whole variety of starting places. Wherever you are, that's great. That's where you are. And that assessment period allows you to establish that with the whole team, because we also see sometimes some real aha moments happen when a district administrator is thinking that the CS education is really not happening, and then sits down and finds out actually our 5th grade team uses it for reinforcing the data parts of the math curriculum. And we see a lot of even those aha moments on the other side too, where an administrator says, "Oh yeah, we've got this covered," and the teachers say, "Actually, we don't do that anymore. We used to." So sometimes we have those moments in just being able to sit down and say, really, really authentically, where are we right now? And then what you do is you set some goals, and specifically, you're going to set some 3-month and 6-month and 1-year goals that are attainable. And this part is really intentionally done so that most script workshops are going to happen between the months of November and January, so that the 3 and 6-month goals are within the same calendar year. We're not making the long-term 5-year goal. We got to go out for a reason. We're looking at a shorter runway of some achievable milestones that are within 3 months. So if you attended the December script workshop, you're talking by spring break, these are the steps we want to have in place to empower this. And then by the end of the school year. And so really kind of setting those short-term goals. I skipped over identifying the target areas, because when you get through with all 5 rubrics, you've now got data points on where you are as a district for over 40 different places where you could lean in and develop that as okay, we're going to target that first. And so these strategies that districts build through the script process are really unique, and they're really designed with the district team. So there's not like a set standard that you must follow this way to be able to get it. But it is neat because regardless of how you got there, the endpoint should be equitable CS education. That's K-12. I see Dan's comment here too, and it's several minutes old, but education is so bad about creating silos. So I agree with you. So what are the script components? These are your rubrics that you're going to be working through with the district team. And it assesses on different criteria, but there's a rubric for looking at leadership. There's, we were talking about the district admin leadership, the teacher leadership, who is going to be really kind of reinforcing the communication, who's going to be reinforcing that implementation plan. Leadership comes in many different places in a district. And this allows you in the scope of that rubric to really make concrete observations about here's where we are, here's where we want to be. Teacher capacity and development. I'm going to show you a little bit under the hood in this rubric here in a second. But teacher capacity and development talks about not just the shot in the arm, everybody go to this one-day workshop and we're all ready to implement CS education. Teacher capacity should also include a plan for newcomers to the district or for refreshers, or maybe a specific teaching style that needs to be accommodated. Or we have to be able to, check back with that teacher and say, did you get what you needed out of that? Can I help you with that? How's that implementation going? And so there's a part of teacher capacity and development that rests with the administrators in a district to be able to, if I go to a training and no one ever asks me about it ever again, is probably not going to have much stay in my classroom. And so that allows us to kind of put some of those things on your rubric as goals. Materials and curricular selection, I would tell you, in my experience, this is why districts come to the workshop. They think we're going to tell them what to teach. And that's not really the case. The materials and curriculum selection is still a local decision, and you have lots and lots of variety that you could choose. But the difference here is that you're armed with a vision and you're armed with the understanding of where you're at in these other components. So your selection of materials is actually a more empowered position. You're not at the mercy of whoever has the most marketing budget, who's getting that curriculum in front of you. And we do offer some supportive ways of looking at the way that different curricular structures meet learners' needs, diverse learners' needs, budgets, the cadence of how this is going to be introduced. So we'd give some support for that, but it's curriculum agnostic. This process is going to help you identify what CS education looks like, not what tools we should use to teach it necessarily. Two more rubrics one is around partners. And the partners will help you to understand your system, who's there to help you support your CS education implementation. It might be the Win for CS group. That's the network of educators across the state learning about CS. It might be Avid or Code.org or different boys and girls clubs. Who are your partners in being able to reinforce the equitable opportunities for CS education? And then the last one is on your community and who are your community partners. Maybe there's a library that runs a program. Maybe there's a summer camp program for coding that you can get, awareness of that program or some opportunities for those folks to come in and reinforce what you're trying to do. And so you get to put some goals and some observations around how your community is supporting CS education as well. That's where those family code nights that Shannon was mentioning, that could be a goal that comes out of that community rubric, to be bringing parents and caregivers in to better understand what students are doing with CS education. There is a plan for the development of a technology or an infrastructure. What types of technology do you have and what do you need to be able to teach CS education? But that rubric is not yet available. So it's not part of the current script tools. So the rubric sessions, when we go through with each one of those 6 rubrics, we actually introduce and kind of set up why this part of your strategic plan is important to have, and kind of the big ideas that you should try to address. And then we give your team the work time to be able to do that self-reflection, identify. So in real time, district teams come and they are able to they're able to have work time that minute to discuss and have conversations about here's what I know is happening in our district, which is why the composition of that district team is so important, because you want to bring a team that's going to be able to tell you this is happening at this level, and this is an expectation at that level. And so you kind of come together in consensus on that rubric. And then it takes you about 10 minutes, believe it or not, to draft goals. Once you know where you are, some of these actionable steps will come off the page. And I know that seems unbelievable maybe at first, but it's not. It's really remarkable how districts coming through this process do get actionable goals. So I want to talk just a second about the way the rubrics are designed, because that's what's inherent to the ability to do these actionable goals. The continuous improvement work that we're doing across the state really follows some of this same educational, reform ideas, in that there's a progression. So when we have things like a best practice in a district, whether it's CS education or something else, usually you see individual early adopters. Bright spots in isolation is another way I've heard this described. There's that one third grade teacher who attended a conference who brought this idea back to our district, and boy, she's really excited about it. That'd be an example. Or the one ninth grade teacher who runs the robotics club after school. That's the early adopter, the bright spot in isolation. And the idea here is you want to take them from the individual early adopter. Through this process, you want to create an opportunity so you get a bigger, broader scale or capacity. So through that script and landscape planning, you're able to identify those early adopters, and you're able to scale it and do capacity building. And that by itself would be a pretty, neat strategic plan, but that's not where we want to stop. The idea is that you can actually create a community that is mutually reinforcing, and through ongoing collaboration, it actually will continue to get better. It will actually elevate the practice of even that early adopter. So you get a reinforcement cycle of the best practice getting even better if you do this right. And I'm going to show you what that looks like here on the rubric in just a second. So I see a question here in the chat that I want to attend to too. Do we do any of this on a state level to make it easier for each school or district to pick which is applicable? And Lawrence, if you had, I missed the pick which is applicable, what that applies to. So if you can give me some context on that. I can tell you that this is being done at the state level. The script workshops are being housed. Oh, you mean resources? Okay. So yes and no, right? The state actually does do some support for the development of open educational resources, and will jump behind some types of resources that provide opportunities for students. Like you'll see things like CTE frameworks or curriculum that is that the OSPI says, yes, this is a best practice. This one would be really good. It's still an option. But they don't jump into supporting, one private product or another. And the materials and curriculum is, there are hundreds, probably thousands of curriculum options for CS education. So they haven't weighed in necessarily on the private options. But you will see in terms of course or framework, sometimes the state will hold up some and say, this meets our requirements. It's a open educational resource. But again, with districts having local control, they're very careful to say, this is a suggestion, not a requirement. And an option that would meet the learning objectives is not necessarily the only criteria that you want for the students in your district. So they can hold up some good options. So I wanted to give you kind of a deep dive into just the structure of one of the rubrics. We're going to take a look at, the teacher capacity and development. And each of these rubrics it kind of starts with an overarching statement that kind of mirrors what you might see with a vision statement. If we're talking about teacher capacity and development, this rubric says, if this is going well in a district that has CS education equitably offered for all students, the teachers have an understanding of the CS education initiatives in the district, so they know about them. They have opportunities for integrated CS projects, so they figure out how it applies to me. Teachers with the responsibility for CS content have defined opportunities to learn CS. So we got PD opportunities, and expand how they teach to different types of students. That's the pedagogical fluency. So expand their pedagogical fluency. And there are well-defined incentives for participating in PD opportunities. So it's like, it's embedded. It's a part of my job, but I understand why I need to do it. And I even have some incentive for doing this. So kind of a big overarching statement. And then it's going to take them into rubric criteria that say things like, as a team, your district is going to make an assessment of where we are for orientation teacher PD, right? Like your very first, I've never thought about teaching CS education. Where do we have that? Maybe I have, 75 elementary educators in my district. Have I offered an intro to CS education for elementary educators yet? And, that might be assessed on that first line of the rubric. But then, are there work groups? Are there professional learning groups? Do my district level teams or vertical teams ever have an opportunity to really talk to each other about the CS education implementation? Is another line on that rubric. Do I have advanced teacher development? So once I've had that initial orientation, is there anything that you come back and we do a little bit more about where am I getting stuck or where am I having some challenges in the implementation and, maybe meeting the needs of diverse learners. So some of the advanced teacher development, and you'd make an assessment there. And teacher feedback. Do my teachers actually ever get any kind of access to a mentor, or does my supervisor come back and check in and say, do you have everything you need to be able to do this with students? And so you as a team go in on that rubric and you assess where you're at. And all of this falls into the teacher capacity and development. So I'm going to pause here. I've got a comment in the chat about asking all teachers to start adding some kind of CS to what they're already teaching. Are we going to be thinking about a specialist who's doing more of a deep dive with students? And so Dan asks this question that comes up really in every single script workshop. They say, how are we doing this? Is this a pullout, or is this something that we bake in for all students as part of their comprehensive education? And I have my own assessments about which one of these two things is more equitable, right? But you have constraints within the district that you're in, and there is not a wrong answer. So you're going to do the best that you can with the resources you have for the students that you have. And so this might look different from one district to another in how they solve this problem. And so long as we are all moving towards the same goal of making it an equitable opportunity for students and doing the best that we have with what we have, there's not a wrong answer to this. And you probably could see districts doing both of these strategies in practice right now. And that's an okay thing. It is where we are as a system. So I don't think that's an answer to that question. But I will tell you that the question resonates with me, and it's something that I see districts actively talk about. Where do we want to be on this? One of these approaches seems easier than the other. And I would agree with you. I think that, without doing too much of a walk off to the side here, even at the state level, we have these conversations about how to endorse and prepare teachers to implement CS education. It's certainly easier if we can make it a specialist track and we can get that person some extra education. But when we do things like that, We also put strain on districts to be able to find individuals who can fill that one specific role too. And so even at the state level, we're making that same sort of consideration, and there's trade-offs for going on either side. So I'm going to show you now a sneak peek at one of the rubric uh, rows, I guess. We're in the teacher capacity and development rubric right now. And what I want to show you about when I mentioned that districts can make goals like that, and they can assess where they're at. And it's a really powerful process for helping a team build a strategic plan. Here you're looking at, do teachers work in groups? It's in that teacher capacity and development. And these could be the word groups is not defined, so it can have local meaning. Does this mean vertical teams? Because I have one, elementary and maybe two classes at each level. So maybe I'm working on a vertical teaming, or maybe I've got 5 fifth grade classrooms. And so this is a team of all of my 5th grade teachers coming together. It could be a middle school team. So do you have teacher work groups is kind of the premise, and what those look like are locally defined. And you have 4 different categories here, which are on that continuous improvement spectrum. So novice means it is not happening, that we are aware of as a district team from different levels in our district. We don't see any evidence of teachers working together on CS education. And you would say, okay, we're novice. If it's emerging, all you have to do to get to emerging is like one team, one set of teachers, those 2nd grade teachers at that elementary, or, those high school math teachers get together and they have a conversation about it. There's no requirement that it happens at every building in the district at this level. We are looking for bright spots in isolation to get to emerging. But here you would see participation of teacher work groups, and they're working together, and they're maybe possibly connecting to outside organizations as well. So you see participation in things like, I'm a part of the CSTA in the Puget Sound or in Spokane, or I am part of the CS for All Teachers group, which is a national. Those would be things that would put you in that emerging category. To be developed, you have to have some kind of cross networking thing happen. So teachers participate in a local level and a national level, or teachers form a professional learning network so that the team at this grade level and the team at that grade level, or the elementary and the elementary, and once a year they get together. So when you start to be developing, you need a community to learn from. And this emerging and developing structure is through the entire script planning tool. So when you see an isolation and a practice in isolation, those bright spots, those are always going to be emerging. And then where you start to connect them, to reinforce them in some way, to have conversations about them, which is really where we learn, that's where you can be in developing. And then highly developed has some kind of a feedback loop. So there's something that's happening that is, teacher work groups that have data, that have structure, that have cadence. We meet every year and we focus on CS in, October and December and April are the focus of our PLCs. There's like a predictable cadence, and you could draw somebody in to that structure who's brand new to the district or brand new to CS, just because it's part of the routines and the habit. It's got a structure to it. And that's consistent through the script rubrics as well. So when we look at this process, what you end up with, if I was a district team and I was saying, hey, I do have like 2 of my 6th grade teachers that have been a part of the CSTA, and they're maybe teaching this project lead the way. I don't know if they talk to each other, but they, I know that they're part of the CSTA. That as a district team would be emerging, and I would circle it, or I would say, here's where I am. And then when I get to the goal setting, what makes this really neat is if I want to be setting a goal around teacher work groups, all I have to do is look one column over at developing and say, oh, my goal is actually to get them to talk about it. Could I put in a structure so that my teachers that are at the 6th grade level could present, upcoming opportunities at the staff meeting after each CSTA meeting? And we start to talk about it, and maybe we start to see another team start to form. That's very specific and actionable within the next 3 months. So that's how you end up with those 3-month goals. You start to look at, here's where we are on this rubric. And if I want to move this objective one column over, because again, we're moving towards, highly developed, equitable structures in all of these components, but it allows you to go from, emerging to developing. Or if your answer was, this is not happening at all in our district, it allows you to really justify even bright spots in isolation are progress forward in some of our objectives. So finding an early adopter is progress. And it allows you to kind of see, yeah, it's not the end. That's not the end. When somebody says, oh, you got this in CS initiative lifted in your district, and what'd you do? You got this one teacher group to come together. That's actually a step. You have to continually do this, and it's not going to be done in 3 months. But when you reassess the next year, you actually can keep moving forward on that front. And so it allows you to put together a district strategy that really acknowledges that some of our first steps are small, and all these small steps start to add up. I was showing you in our teacher capacity and development, we actually do use this rubric, and we allow them to kind of go in and circle where they are. And then you also have something that's very visual to be able to say, okay, we want to move it from here to here, or we want to move it from here to here, kind of thing. I have a few more resource slides that I wanted to show you. And these are just when I mentioned that you'll go through the rubric for the materials and curriculum selection. What I put on this page is a QR code that takes you to the archive that CS for All out of New York has put together of just some different materials and curriculum selection opportunities that you have. We have districts that are allowed to, that are encouraged to explore that platform. When I counted up last week, there were over 200 materials and curriculum selection pieces on that. So if curriculum and materials are what they came for, they can definitely explore and find some. The CS for All also outlines what, the specific focus of that CS curriculum is, what grade level it's appropriate for, so they can actually go down and do a little bit more specific looking for those curricular resources if they'd like to. I mentioned that there's a rubric on leadership, and this one I pulled forward because I think, again, these are the statements that are at the front of the rubric that kind of allow you to see if we are doing this implementation correctly, this is where we want to be. This is the aspirational statement, rather, that's right up front. And so this one talks about the district leadership team has multiple stakeholders. So your leaders, you're mobilizing teacher leaders and building leaders and district administrators with a common vision for what this looks like in the plan. And it allows you to evaluate where you are and set some goals for what that looks like to be on a cohesive front for implementation. You're going to assess your partners and who can help you at the state and national level in this CS education implementation. And finally, your community, who is in your community, and you're able to set some goals about who you want to pull in to help you implement and sustain your CS education initiative. So I am getting set here to wrap up, and we've got a little bit of time for some Q&A. But if script is something that you are new to, that you would like more information about, I did put a QR code to the next statewide script workshop for districts. Will be November 30th, December 2nd. And then the following week, it's the 7th and 8th, and then the 9th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. And it's a virtual one for the district teams. And I can put the link for that in the chat as well. Maybe. No, maybe. See if I can get it. There we go. So with that, I will open it up if there are questions or big ideas or aha moments. I'd love to be able to hear from you or follow up with you. I also want to acknowledge today is Make a Difference Day, and I want to thank you for spending it with us talking about CS education, because you do make a difference every day, and the investment of your time today is hopefully going to make a difference for a lot of young people. Are there any other questions? I love it. Yes, follow up. I see a note in the chat. Dan's following up with Catherine. So your CS lead for your ESD is a great next person to talk to about this script, and they can get you additional information about it. I love this comment. Yeah. So the small districts are actually so amazing to work through this process. Um, they can move through some of these steps a little bit faster than some of the big ones. And so I've seen some really incredible action in districts that are pretty small. And if you have curiosity about, speaking to a district that's similar, we have probably districts that we could connect you with to actually ask them about the plan that they have and how they felt about the process. Yeah, I see this about a comment about flexing a lot over the last 2 years. I think that is, yeah, a very diplomatic way of saying that, probably. But I think asking for anything new isn't super easy, and that resonates as well. I think, some of our educators just feel like they've been in a state of trauma for the last 2 years, and asking them to consider something new is big and scary. And I think, this process, it puts some structure to it, which can actually make some of our apprehensions, it eases at least some of them. And to be able to put it in a pace that feels achievable. So a 3-month goal, a 6-month goal doesn't have to be, you don't have to advance all 5 rubrics either. Your priority focus might be, these are 3 things that go really well with district initiatives that we have. And so we're going to focus our areas there. And it allows you to kind of be strategic, which is the educational buzzword of the day, but it fits. Awesome. Well, it's 2 o'clock. I'm going to let y'all head back out. I so appreciate on a Saturday afternoon in the middle of the day that you hung with me for this hour. And if I can be helpful or you want to follow up with me directly, I'll put my email in the chat as well. Thanks again, Lawrence. Good to see you.